나무 묘호랭개교 나무 묘호랭개교 나무 묘호랭개교. Alrighty. Hello, everyone. Namo Myoho Renge Kyo. Still arranging wires here. Anyway, okay. Thank you for being here. Hoping you're healthy and safe. Sifu Sylvain with you, as always, sharing my experience of Buddhism, my study of Buddhism, my own insights for whatever they're worth, sharing with you all, the Sangha, so that we can compare and contrast and get past the words to the profundity of meaning of Shakyamuni's teachings, with respect to the scholarship of thousands of years of scholars from Nagarjuna and Vasubandhu to Tendai in China to Dengyo and finally our nearest time-wise mentor, Nichiren. And with that, we are going to continue with a new writing that we started in the last video on selecting the right time, a tract by Nichiren, the Buddha's disciple. And the new paragraph we're going to start on in this writing is the teaching capacity of people and right time. And it begins with a question. So here we go. Question. Suppose this great Dharma is preached to those whose intelligence and conviction are not ready. Their capacity isn't up to snuff, right? Ignorant people are bound to slander it, right? People who don't understand, I don't know if they're bound to slander it, but this is the question as translated. But certainly we understand when people don't understand something, they tend to want to protect their ego, right? So they either vilify or discount or whatever. I mean, that's just human behavior, right? So the question continues. And as a result, they would fall into evil realms because out of their ignorance, they would turn away from the ultimate teaching, the truth. Isn't this the fault of he who preaches it? Blaming the teacher rather than the student. Okay. Answer. Suppose a road was built and someone got lost on the way. Can we blame the person who built the road for that? Or suppose a patient refused to take the medicine a great doctor prescribed for him and died. Is this the fault of the doctor? So I guess that answer was followed up with another question. The question being, it is said in the Lotus Sutra, Facile 2, Chapter 3, a parable, do not preach this sutra to ignorant people. I remember reading that. That comes up in the back of our minds every now and again, right? How do we know who the right person is to promulgate this teaching, right? We're all charged in Buddhism, in the Lotus Sutra practice, to walk the world as bodhisattva. And we've talked at length about the nature of bodhisattva being someone who's determined to maintain that Buddha clarity in our samsaric mind. And that by maintaining that clarity as we course through the world, that is the behavior of a bodhisattva, because by maintaining that Buddha clarity, we influence our environment from that place, whether we open our mouths or not. The question, though, becomes, as we attract people who question our state of being or directly about Buddhism, how do we filter those deserving and not deserving, or those that are problematic versus those that we want to invest time in? How do we make that judgment? Yeah? You ever thought of those things? In the fourth facile, chapter 10, the teacher of the Dharma, it declares, quote, "Do not give it to others carelessly." Well, that's a little different way of saying it. The first facile, chapter 14, Peaceful Practices of the Sutra, further states, "This Lotus Sutra is the treasured teaching of Buddhas. This is supreme of all sutras. Keep it and refrain from expounding it for a long period of time," end quote. Don't these statements in the Lotus Sutra enjoin us not to preach unless the audience has sufficient intelligence and conviction? It certainly would seem so, right? And I'll chime in on that simply because you and I have, many of us, have experienced groups or sectarian groups or sects themselves who interpret the words of Nichiren and others that we should go assault people in parking lots with pamphlets and, it used to be a joke when I was in my younger years. Yeah, it was a long time ago. Of those people in the airports with their little ponytails running around handing out the Bhagavad Gita or some other promulgation, and how annoying those people were, right? And then at one point in my youth, I found myself in an organization that did exactly the same thing, but in mall parking lots. And I thought, something's wrong with this picture. And I think for my own place here, and as I read these quotes in this question, I think the overriding meaning is that this practice, this precious practice of enlivening, awakening, instantiating our Buddha clarity in mind is so profound, so deeply life-altering, life-changing, that shouldn't we revere it, have deep respect for it, and keep that practice dignified? Shouldn't we behave with dignity toward humanity, toward life, certainly? But this highest practice of instantiating that maximal life is itself the way to do this, the way to instantiate the maximal dignity of life, not only in ourselves, but all life throughout the entire universe. Shouldn't we behave with an appropriate amount of respect and dignity for this practice? Does running around in parking lots, assaulting people and telling them to chant Namo Myoho Renge Kyo, does that really support the dignity and respect of this practice? It seems sort of desperate, doesn't it? It seems like it trivializes the matter. If we're to have dignity to spread this teaching with respect and expect respect for it, as these words would seem to suggest, shouldn't we be offering this practice in a human-to-human conversation, dialogue, established upon the principle of expanding, creating, understanding, experiencing better, a more dignified life, a growth, a deep, abiding respect for self-teaching, learning, and becoming more alive. Shouldn't it be in a conversation, human to human, where we can establish a dignified rapport before we then introduce a methodology for doing exactly that? We may have differing opinions on that, but I've had this thought in the back of my head since early on in my practice. How do I decide who I should teach? And to be completely honest, understanding the huge investment I'm making in time of myself to support this other person's practice. You see, that's a key part of this. I don't want to sprinkle around, hey, here's enlightenment, bye, because that's not bodhisattva practice. There's plenty of other quotes we could take from many sutras, it's certainly in the Lotus, and from these same chapters that are called out here, about the dedication. You don't just introduce something this profound to somebody without the commitment to answer their questions, to guide them along until they can self-teach and practice. Right? Isn't that true in almost anything in life? Don't we bring people up until they can support? I mean, certainly of human beings. Look how long a childhood and pubescence and young adulthood lasts in a human being before they're anywhere near really taking full responsibility for their own existence. You might argue some never do. So why would you take the most important teaching that you say you prize with dignity and just drop it on the doorstep and run? That's not dignity. That's not even responsible behavior, right? So how do we pick and choose? I know there have been times in my life when people have come to me to ask me about Buddhism, and I knew them from other behaviors and thought, wow, that's a big bag of spider webs, and thought, I don't think I can dedicate the kind of time that you're going to need to start grasping this. I'm not proud of those thoughts. I'm just thinking back. Yeah, I had those thoughts. And then I had thoughts the other way around where I wish I could entreat that person to spend more time with me, because not only would I enjoy exposing them to what I've experienced, but that I would learn from the process myself, selfishly. Those are the easy ones, right? Well, it depends on your personality, I suppose. But then I also came to realize that sometimes those people that seem like they're going to be the messiest ones to teach, if they had the balls, if they had the persistence to come to me to look for answers, guidance, it would be absolutely heinous for me to turn them away. Because once you understand Buddhism well enough, you understand that the people that come to you in your life don't come to you by accident. It's a karmic relationship that we all have. And if something seems difficult for you to accept and take on responsibility for, it's usually because there's some great karma for you to affect, some great negativities in your own life that need to be blown apart. And that there's great opportunity here for a much faster change in karma, change in bodhisattva, accomplishment of Buddhahood that is now available to you by just make the effort. And that has become my experience. Well, I'm very cautious to that initial or interest. And people, look, I'm living in Northeast Mississippi, the Bible Belt, and I get occasional phone calls or emails from people who are studying in Christianity or other religions. They're in seminary. They're being programmed into religions. And yet they reach out. I know it's part of their curriculum to seek out other philosophies, what they call religions. And they call Buddhism a religion. That's just rhetoric, right? They don't have to know that it isn't. But to fulfill their curriculum, they seek me out and they want to come and speak to me. Now, I could just take a high road and say, you people will never understand, piss off, right? And feel justified. But having practiced as long as I have, having a deeper sense for what Buddhism and coursing as a bodhisattva is, these people have come out of the woodwork to find me, and I'm not that easy to find, and want to commit to coming and speaking with me. I have to make time for them. I have to make time for them. And you know what? Every time I've done it, it's been an amazing discovery for myself. It's put me through turmoil. Have I done the right thing? Should I be doing this? Take all of that. That's something else. That's not Buddhism. That's my own karma that needs to be cleared out. And it's always been fascinating. I get these people to chant with me. They find out, and they always leave. One of the number one thing that they always leave, I've had a minister here who thanked me for demystifying Buddha. Because their exposure to Buddha is the little fat guy sitting cross-legged. Just another icon to worship. And if there's two things that I always accomplish when I'm visited by anyone, regardless of whether it's from seminary, just anyone who's ignorant of Buddhist teachings, is that Buddha is not a person. It's a state of mind. Right? And this is how we practice. Namo Myoho Renge Kyo. Do it with me. Keep a rhythm. I'll open up my Butsudan. I'll say, we focus on this mandala. Don't worry about what it says or means. That's not the point. It's just an object of focus for you to open your mind to that Buddha I was talking about. So let's do it together. And usually they'll ask at some point, how do you do it? Can you show us how you do it? Oh, I guess. How much more amazing is that experience than just running up to some stranger in a parking lot saying, say these magic words? Right? That's a terrible way of spreading this teaching. If anything, it's a very egotistical way of spreading it. So, on this question, how do we preach unless the audience has sufficient intelligence and conviction? Throwing back the question, I've never seen or read this rhetoric before. Again, this is a new group of translators, right, than the previous readings we've had of Gosho. So, throwing back the question, in the, quote, never despising bodhisattva, 20th chapter of the Lotus Sutra, it is said that once there was a bodhisattva named Never Despising, who bowed to anyone saying, I respect you deeply. Well, that's quite different than what I was talking about earlier, right? Some of the people with impure mind became angry, as people will do, spoke ill of him and abused him, saying, quote, what an ignorant monk he is. See, look, he respects anyone, right? Very human behavior. They struck him with a stick or a piece of wood or a tile or stone. Again, it is said in the encouragement for upholding this sutra, 13th chapter, quote, ignorant people will speak ill of us and threaten us with swords or sticks. These statements in the Lotus Sutra make clear that men such as Bodhisattva Never Despising preach the true Dharma despite being spoken ill of, abused, and beaten. Would you say that they made a mistake in preaching? So this is an interesting dance around this, what I think is a very important question. It's one thing to treat people with deep respect. I think that's demonstrating a behavior, and certainly within the realm of bodhisattva. And people will react. And I think in this day and age of polarities in our societies, they might react really, really poorly. But to hold on to that, to sincerely mean, as you're being chastised, I understand, I respect you, I respect you deeply, I will leave you alone. To leave them with the idea that you, quite probably a complete stranger, always leave your interactions with people holding them in high esteem. It may piss them off, but you will be displaying the equanimity of Buddhism. That's not the same as running up with a pamphlet and saying, chant this Daimoku. They have no understanding of whatsoever. It's a very different thing. Please see that that is no subtle difference. We humans are built on relationships with others, and that's the first step toward dialogue. Then, once dialogue is established, it's respectful, it's dignified to discuss enlightenment. But throwing it like a hot water pail in somebody's face without some pretext of a relationship is totally irresponsible. But you see the difference here? Question. Those two sets of statements in the Lotus Sutra are as incompatible as water and fire. How am I supposed to accept this? Okay, perhaps we'll get a good explanation here. Answer. Grandmaster Tendai says in his words and phrases on the Lotus Sutra, quote, it all depends on the situation. And his disciple, Grandmaster Chang'an, states in the annotations on the Nirvana Sutra, quote, selection must be made carefully without being one-sided. This is exactly what I was talking about earlier with my youthful experience. Don't make snap decisions, but instead make a careful analysis. Careful analysis doesn't happen in a snap moment. It requires the development of some kind of a relationship, something to indicate that the two or multiple human beings are in dialogue. Yeah? Walking up and assaulting somebody is not dialogue. Let's continue with what Nichiren says. What they meant is that, one, preaching should be suspended sometimes when people are abusive. If this relationship isn't producing dignity and humanity and a dialogue, when abuse enters into the dialogue, it may be time to let that abuse assuage itself. Don't attack it head on. You're not having dialogue then, you're having a shouting match, right? An argument is an ongoing conversation. There may be disagreement, but that doesn't mean somebody's about to hurt you. If the disagreement accelerates or develops to that point, then the dialogue has ceased. Somebody's backed into a corner. You must release them and let them figure their own way back to the value of the conversation. Always the dignity, right? 2, but other times it would be better to preach even if people are abusive. 3, sometimes preaching should be suspended when most people are abusive, although there are a few resolved people. But sometimes preaching must be done even if all people are abusive. Yeah, so the situation regards presentation of the teaching with humility, but always respect and dignity. So, do you have a friend or friends that sometimes when you are in conversation with them, they have strong opinions and they shout at you and they want you to change your mind? And that may be a situation because of a long-standing relationship where you need to say, no, you don't understand. I will stand where I am until you understand. And we may agree to disagree at this point, but you will not change my mind. I will hold firm until the time when you come around, and I think that eventually you will. Now, you might say, well, that's unwise. Well, it's unwise for somebody you just met on the corner, 10 minutes ago, who suddenly reared into a corner and told you this, that, or other, and is quoting memes and just gone off their rock. Now you're not having a productive dialogue. But dialogue, argument, doesn't have to be quiet and civil all the time. It depends on how invested those parties are in the relationship. And karma being what it is, will sometimes explode into unreasonable behavior. But that doesn't mean walk away. That means you may have to hold firm and take some abuse because it's not about you. It's about their struggle. Yeah? But it all depends on the investment. When Shakyamuni Buddha first attained perfect enlightenment under the Bodhi tree and began preaching the Flower Garland Sutra, such great bodhisattvas as Dharma Wisdom, Forest of Merit, Diamond Banner, Diamond Pitaka, Manjushri, Samantabhadra, Maitreya, and Moon of Emancipation gathered together. Right? Remember, these are all personages. They're not actual people, but they're the behavioral equivalent of many people, right? The crowd included also an incalculable number of such ordinary beings with great intelligence as the king of the Brahma heaven, Indra, and the 4 heavenly kings. When he preached the Agama Sutras at Deer Park, a huge crowd appeared, including his first 5 disciples, such as Kaundinya, Kashyapa, and his disciples, 250 in number. Shariputra and his disciples, also 250 strong. And 80,000 gods, right? All of these different types of mental states in persons. In both cases, however, the Buddha did not preach his true intention, the Lotus Sutra. He didn't take him directly to Namo Myoho Renge Kyo. He told them provisional things that he knew they needed to start to grapple with and understand before he could drop this major, profound teaching on them. Ah, that is where we begin. Maybe with the first 4 noble truths? Can we agree that all life is suffering? Isn't that what everyone tells us? Every religion, every philosophy? We can agree on something? Okay, now I'm going to blow that apart with the second noble truth. All of that suffering comes from our avarice, our need to own, to have, our fear of losing. Oh, that's already a huge step away from what religions would have us believe, right? And it's also a huge step toward the now, instead of this amorphous liquid future that most, if not all, religions plant into our heads as after we leave this loathsome, atoning, suffering life. Because after that second noble truth, all that suffering is self-created. That's a big pill to swallow. But if we're willing to swallow it, and we understand that our suffering is self-made, the third noble truth says all we need to do is stop doing that. And we can start to experience our life glorified, wonderfully, amazing, without those stresses and avarice and fears, and because they're self-created, if we stop them, we can live a completely different life. That's the here and now. That's not after you die. It's right there in the first 3 noble truths. And the fourth is the beginning of understanding how we do that, how we get there. So it's not just some pie in the sky, oh yeah, a thought experiment. This is how you do it. That's not Namo Myoho Renge Kyo yet, but it's leading there. One of those 8-fold noble path, which is the 4th noble truth, has samadhi in it. And that's just a teaching about how to consider that your mind rules your life. This is the way to teach others, as Shakyamuni did. Yeah. Next, while preaching the Hodo Sutras at the earnest request of his father, King Suddhodana, Shakyamuni Buddha visited the king in his royal palace and preached the meditation on the Buddha Sutra. He went back to visit dear old dad, who was not altogether happy that his son left the kingdom to pursue some loathly life of religious practice, right? For his mother, the Buddha went up to the Trimsa heaven, where he preached the Maya Sutra for 90 days. What treasured teaching should he have concealed from his beloved parents? Nevertheless, he did not preach the Lotus Sutra for them. They simply weren't ready. After all, it was not because of the lack of understanding of the audience that he did not preach the sutra. It was because the time was not ripe. It wasn't their time to take that final leap. So I read this and I think there's so much inherent respect for this teaching, and rightfully so. That always this is the guiding principle in conversation, in relations. However the interlocutor reacts, ballistically or voraciously, the key is not to be affected, bodhisattva, but to be effecting, to be influencing, not being influenced. with the wisdom to see if somebody is truly interested or whether they're just entertaining you in order to find ways to destroy you. They're really just destroying themselves, in other words. They're not sincere. Curiosity is a very beautiful commodity. It means there's a mind thirsting for knowledge, for experience, for understanding. And sometimes we have to inspire that in people. Other times we need to respond to it in people. But when it turns ugly, when dignity leaves the room, then you must hold firm and ready yourself for a restart, whether it happens right then or it happens 6 months from then. As long as you hold firm, then the dignity is still in the conversation. What the others are wrestling with is for them to wrestle with. You can't fix people. Buddhism is a self-practice. We fix ourselves. Yeah? It's very important to understand that. And we can offer help to others all day long. But unless they're willing to help themselves, our aid is limited by the length of our words. It's up to those who are seeking, who are curious, to hear those words and use them to help themselves. Yeah? This is why words are powerful, but words can be very misleading, because never make the mistake that your words, my words, are accurate to others' thoughts. They will hear and manipulate and consolidate their thinking from their own karma, their own experience, their own ideas. And so be prepared for the same questions to come back at you in many different ways, because we're all assembling ideas, slowly finding center, finding that critical adjustment of thinking that will allow us to attain our maximal life. It's the nature of karma. It's so varied and it's so in the moment that we're constantly developing closer and closer to our Buddha. This is the work of the Bodhisattva. Yeah. Where are we time-wise? Not too long. This next section is called the 500-year periods after the death of the Buddha. So Nichiren's going to walk us through each 500-year period until he gets us to this day and age, our age. Yeah? So after this initial question of how do you know whether somebody's ready to accept this teaching or not, look at your own life. What did you have to go through in order to get to that moment? Not only where your curiosity led you to learn more, but how quickly you went through different stages of understanding as you taught yourself. You got to give other people the benefit of that distance, that work, right? But now he's going to talk in relation of ages and how people of Shakyamuni's day versus 500 years after his passing, his extinction, 1,000 years, 1,500 years, right? That the development of the human mind and the relationships that we have changes greatly how we understand the Dharma. So that should be interesting and be somewhat elucidating of how we approach our practice. In the meantime, I wish you to be safe and remain in good health, of course, always. What did I do with my pen? Silly man. And yeah, keep studying. Watch it. There's so many videos here You can look in the search bar on this channel for just about any term, and you'll get some result set of videos. Some 15 years old, some much more recent. There's the website, threefoldlotus.com. Lots of basic information there. There's some of it is just my research shared with you. It's not just me saying. This is all about a resource for the Sangha to chew through information and make up your own mind, right? The bookstore, and the mandala store, of course. So keep your practice strong. It's a matter of great dignity and import. Your life has every bit the importance of Buddha, because that is what you're manifesting. Yeah? And I will see you as we continue this translation of this, what do they call it, this tract of Nichiren on the time. And until then, bye for now.